probably gonna be one of the most overlooked things that can be changed right now that can save hours.
It literally will save hours. I kid you not. What we're going to be talking about here today with the Recruit CC call is obviously going to be part of the official training that goes out, and everyone's going to have access to the slide deck. But anytime that there's additional information that can be pushed out regarding these subjects to keep up with that pace of change is going to be very, very important. There's definitely not enough bandwidth a lot of times to make sure that it is as effective as it needs to be, because everyone's got day jobs, right? And so everyone's trying to get out as much information as possible, but at the same time, still making the mission happen. And so, the more people that we can get involved that are speaking to the people that are, creating these different tools and assets that are to be used by the field, and to be able to get those shared out and get some, positive training on it. Like I said, it's everybody wins in that scenario.
Yes, sir. And with that, like I said, I do thank you for stepping on here to give me some of your time, and we can kind of break down AFRISS and see what new changes you had.
Sounds good. I mean, the biggest change right now, obviously everyone's aware of the big SOP-G change that just happened. With that, several chapters got addressed and updated, and a lot of extra things got put in and a lot of things got taken out, right? So there's basically a kind of a give and take. Obviously, you being part of that team kind of saw that firsthand, where there was a lot of things that were in different sections that had to get rearranged to make it more streamlined. And it makes sense, like, hey, if I got to go find this particular aspect of our job, why is it in 3 different places, right? And so a lot of that got moved around. Some of the biggest changes that obviously are going to be felt by the field are how we actually kind of go through, A to Z with an applicant, right? The biggest one being that recruit management, or DEP management is what we used to call it, is now starting at the recruit stage, formerly known as PIRR. And I know everybody had a lot of heartache about that acronym, PIR ready. But, changing it to recruit, I think it makes sense. Again, trying to align our verbiage with as much to the civilian sector as possible, so that if people are transitioning in and out, there's a little bit better of a familiarity there already. But also, just from a training standpoint, I think it makes more sense. It's less confusing for new recruiters coming into the job. But with DEP management now being called recruit management, starting at the recruit stage, what that initially does at face value is say, okay, let's say I have 10 DEPers. I have a pretty full DEP. I have 10 DEPers. And I also have, because business is booming, let's say I have 10 or 15 recruits as well that I'm trying to get through the pipeline. Well, now instead of doing a DEP CC call and having to do admin for all of those DEPers, now you're adding an extra 10, 15 applicants to the mix. And, formally, we know that when you're doing a DEP CC, it could take a very long time. I'm sure you have that experience right now, right? You go through the process, you complete your DEP CC, the actual action of it, and then you have literally at that point in time, you have probably another hour, maybe an hour and a half of admin to do afterwards, because not only do you have to do the event in AFRISS, right, to kind of give the overall picture, these people attended the DEP call, but at the same time, you also have to go in and each individual applicant right-click, conduct follow-up, put in kind of a personalized comment, and then do that for now 25 people, and that's a lot of time spent. So, tell me a little bit about your experience with managing the DEP calls, right? It ends up being a lot.
Yep. And then that's where, when I came down there, that was like the thing that I was telling you all about, like how I started that. The second that Genesis was kind of getting implemented, I was like, if you kind of realize the window of the processing really hasn't changed. Now, when you do stuff has. So instead of, I felt like when I first started recruiting, 75% of it was that management, and that 25% was the processing. Now it feels like 75% is processing and 25% is debt management. Like when they're on the floor, they already know what jobs they're pretty much going to get. when they dip in, which is also a good thing for us too. And we've already built that trust along the way with recruit management that we're talking about. So it was something that I've always been doing, but like you said, the was it the processing of it, the documenting of it was that's the hardest part of it. And that's why I've been watching this. We really need to get this out because I've been watching this, and the processes that you guys have been making has been game changers. So,
and that's just it. So inevitably, we are in a human resources field, and as sometimes painful it can be to do a lot of the documenting that we do, it is a necessary part of our job, right? But with that being said, we have to figure out where that middle ground is, because it is a necessary part of our job, you know, and there's a lot of factors we'll go into as we kind of go through this training a little bit as to why the documentation is still an important part. However, as a team, we have to provide effective and efficient means of doing that documentation, because it is important, but we also have to make it to where it's incentivized to be done correctly. Because if we can fool ourselves all day long, but when certain admin processes of our job take an exorbitant amount of time that sometimes when you're on the bag and on the go, you feel you don't have, things are going to be done as efficiently, if you catch my drift, as possible, right? And we're all not naive to that fact. But what that does do is it can hurt us in different stages of the process. And so, like I said, we have to find a middle ground where the documentation is effective, it makes sense, and it's efficient, and it also is getting done. And you guys have an easy way of accomplishing it. So nobody likes getting done with a DEP call. A lot of times they're at the end of the day, right? You end up, a lot of people do them at 4 o'clock. Some of them do it as late as 6 o'clock. Now it's 7 or 8 o'clock, and then you feel like you have to do another admin or wait till the next morning to do it. Then you forget it because the day gets busy and it just snowballs, right? So that was kind of the thought process is, we know this has to happen. We know it's not happening as correctly as it should. How can we incentivize and how can we make it this efficient enough so people will get it done? So it's too easy not to do, if that makes sense.
yes, right. And that's another thing too, where a lot of these changes that we're trying to push out is we understand that we have to do the basics of it, right? So I highly suggest people to do basics and then document where we can do things better. So, obviously we do all the basic stuff, and this right here is extra to hopefully fix something else that we are already doing that's baseline that we can replace with this product that might be easier and more efficient, that can still capture the basics. So, and pretty much this right here does that. So
definitely, and we can kind of jump right into it. So with it being up on the screen, obviously changing everything to a recruit CC call, you see that that change happen across AFRISS. Everywhere it said DEP previously, it still will now say recruit. And the reason for that is DEP is basically more looked at as an internal term, right? So while we're still going to, a lot of people have the habit to say, oh, these are my DEPers and these are my PIRRs or whatever. It's going to take a little time for that to kind of make its way through everyday terminology. Moving forward, anybody who gets to the recruit stage is looked at as a person who has provided commitment and they're moving forward with the Air Force, right? That's the person you've closed a sale on. They're motivated to move forward. They have the capability to move forward, and we can press from there. And then they will still DEP, right? And you'll see that in parentheses in AFRISS, right? There'll still be a DEP marker because that's a necessary part of the actual processing of an applicant. But we really want to create more touch points. And that's really what this comes down to, is with the DEP stage, that how we used to have it, like you said, used to be 75%, and 25% processing. Now it being so much shorter, some people don't make it to a DEP call because people are booking jobs and they're rolling out, which is a fantastic thing because it's great for the Air Force. It's also great for the applicant because we're getting them ahead, right, and taking account to what their goals are and getting them there faster. But what that can potentially lead to is having less touch points. And so if we back that process up a little bit to the recruit stage, now we're generating more touch points in the sense of having engagement with that applicant, being able to continue to build rapport, continue to invest in the applicant and get them through the process. So, you know, with this, like I said, debt management starting at the recruit stage. We revamped the DEP CC call function. Like I said, it is now called Recruiters Commanders Calls. You'll see that in AFRISS. You'll see that as we go through this, the rest of this training. And then again, to accommodate the increased admin load we know comes with more applicants being in that stage, requiring DEP CC call documentation. Being able to provide an efficient way to do so by streamlining the interface and making documenting the actual event as easy as possible. Big pieces for this, right? Minimize time admin. That's realistically the biggest one. So we know this has to get done. How can we make this more efficient? Because it's more efficient, it increases the quality. Because where before, you know, it was almost like you have to force yourself to get there, that was going to decrease the quality of documentation that happens. And what that does is if you have an applicant going through the process, and let's say something happens, right? I'm sure you've encountered this. You get that red flag. You feel like something was a little bit off. You didn't trust your gut. You kind of let it go. And eventually you're at a point where, hey, this person doesn't want to move forward anymore, right? Your heart sinks. You kind of go through that whole process. And if anybody's ever had potentially an in-week cancellation or, you know, really short notice situation come up, generally you start digging through the comments, right? Yeah. You know, what happened? Did I document everything, right? and that could be really kind of you know, like a heart-sinking feeling. And not having all that information, because it was a pain to do, actually sets you back in the ability to resell that applicant, right? You know, a lot of people think the documentation side is a lot of CYA on the recruiting side, but the reality is maybe that's a little bit of a part of it, but it's really about giving yourself the tools to go back into that applicant's file and say, okay, why did this person join in the first place, right? That's why those initial appointment comments are so important. Why is this person even here, right? What do I know about this person? We talk about the investigate step, right? And getting to know really why they're even here in the first place. And that continues as you're building rapport and you go through different steps of the impact process. And eventually as they become an applicant, building rapport into the recruit management side. When you get to that point and they don't want to go move forward, you now, if you've done it correctly, have a bunch of tools to go back to see where the red flags were, what things were coming up in their life. If you were investing in your applicants, right? Knowing what's going on. Hey, how's mom and dad doing? Hey, I heard you had a wrestling meet yesterday. How'd it go, right? Did you win? Did you lose? You going to state? What's going on, right? Having those, and that's why it says greater customer retention, is you can now use that as leverage to work on that resale and realign that person with why they came to you in the first place and potentially save that cancellation. If you never document any of that stuff, you don't really have those tools. You hope that your brain remembers it after the hundreds of applicants you're probably talking to over the time of recruiting. So that's really kind of the key piece is if you make it easy, you will do it. And if you do it, you're actually benefiting yourself, doing future you a favor. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. And I know for me, when it comes to like documenting, I used to do like the long word paragraphs, you know, and that was getting a lot. So what I started doing was the bullet points. And then like you're saying, like when we last talked about what's coming up in his events, you know, in his life or her life. And then what's the next thing I look forward to doing with her or him or that we're going to talk about. So doing those key things allowed me to save a lot of time in writing like the whole word spiel, because, you know, at the end of the day, those templates, they're amazing to start with. But when you start processing a lot of people, you're going to want to narrow those down to just key bullet points to where it's like you already know in your head how to do the rest of it, but you want to make sure that you remember the key facts. And never forgetting those key facts is huge.
Exactly. And you know, a lot of people think that there's a fear, well, I need to write a book in AFRISS in order to be properly documented, right? Not really, right? What I always tell my recruiters is, give me a line or two as to why this person's here. So I have an understanding between, what they were looking for, what you sold them on, and kind of the overall backstory of what happened at an appointment, right? And as you're going through and you have these important one-on-one follow-ups or important phone calls, let me know if they took a short notice trip down to Florida to see grandma because she wasn't doing well, and then they came back and it wasn't an issue. That's kind of an important thing to know because, from a sense of one, we care about our applicants. We want to be able to show that empathy if they have stuff going on in their lives. But those are the key moments that they'll remember, that their recruiter remembers about them, right? It's always about how we made them feel. And if you're not taking notes, it's impossible to expect yourself to remember all of those things. So that's exactly it. The important stuff.
Yeah.
So how do we create this new event? Everyone's probably already familiar with, how they created a DEP CC in the past. When we do this new recruit commanders call, it's going to be very similar. So the interface is all basically the same. We've just made some tweaks to how everything gets documented within the event itself. We've had recruiters in the field actually test this. There's a couple of things we'll talk about that they noticed that we're going to make some edits on the back end. But for the most part, it's going to be pretty seamless. So starting right off the get-go is click into your calendar, you get a new event, and then you go down to the lead source, you select recruit commanders call. Excuse me. Plain and simple. You enter all your time, dates, and all of that, and then you put in your planned comments, right? Basically, along with instructing kind of how this is done, there's also going to be a couple of just tidbits here of, if you're a brand new recruiter, what should you even do at a commander's or at a commander's call, right? What should you be kind of focusing on? At the end of the day, it's kind of a very, everybody has different little philosophies, but a common one, right, is PQMI, right? Perpetuate, motivate, qualify, and inform. It's kind of the big four, right? So planning out your event, and like I said, just a couple of tidbits for recruiters. What do you use?
I'm gonna have to steal that perpetuate one. So I'm a big fan of social media, especially when it comes to like people sharing our posts and tagging the schools and sharing it to groups. One that I have not tried doing though is that one. It's a really interesting one where each recruit has to find 5 Instagram new followers for our page. Now, granted though, I like that because it's a good challenge for them, and we know that some of the followers won't stay. But even if they just follow for like you get like 2 or 3 of them, that's still gonna you're still now it's recruit management. So if you have like 10 recruits, that's 50 new followers, and let's say only 2 of them stay, 2 or 3 of them stay, that's still 20 or 30 new followers every month.
Exactly.
Those aren't even the ones that we're talking about once you share the page or once you share the event on your Instagram, once you share it to Facebook groups. What I do is that help my Facebook algorithm explode lately. It was from Master Inglesby. I don't want to.
Oh, yeah.
So when I went down there with him, he was showing us about finding groups, local community groups, and it's amazing that we think that because we move so much, that these people aren't really well connected to their community. When I say that Facebook, they know everybody. I just had somebody who just left for Loadmaster who, when I shared it to his Facebook community, they're like, oh my gosh, I used to babysit for him. I'm so glad that he's all grown up and that he's doing great things. And she shared it on her page, and then everyone commented on her page. So it's just those little things. And yes, we're talking about an old woman right now, but at the same time, she's still going to pass on to her friend who might have a grandchild of themselves. So
at 100%, obviously, the audience on Facebook is growing older. It's a pretty common statistic out there. Everybody kind of knows that. That's not a bad thing necessarily, because I love the way that my aunts, my uncles, they share everything under the sun. It's kind of cringy sometimes for us, right? But at the same time, when it comes to what we do, that's a spiderweb effect, right? It's touching everybody a little bit, and it spreads like wildfire, like you said. It can help a lot. But yeah, the perpetuate one is an absolute, a really, really big one. Obviously, we have the Aim High app now, so always being able to encourage even friends and family members, hey, go ahead and download the MI app. Follow your folks through basic training. If you have somebody else that you might know that might be interested, those things are key. We have tools to be able to help us with these things. Obviously those have gotten out to the field, and there's more updates, more positive stuff coming down the pipeline. But it's being able to use that stuff to perpetuate. It's always one that kind of gets neglected, but always perpetuate, right? It's always it. Going on to the next step, though, basically, when we get to this section, this is where things start to open up a little bit, and this is where we streamlined the interface. And basically, what you're doing here is you're going to have the ability to click on the add button under where it says participants. Formerly, there were some different drop-down options here, but moving forward, you'll select recruit. So that way you get all of those folks that are in the recruit stage that haven't depped in yet. You click add, it will add those folks to the event itself. And then you'll click on add again, go to the DEP section to get all of your DEPers. It'll automatically populate everybody that's in your DEP. You'll add those. And then that way you have everybody who's in the recruit and DEP stage added as a participant in that event. The role column you'll see will always say DEP member for each applicant. And that's strictly just because, again, that has no bearing. Those are all still recruits and DEP members. But as for right now, it's just going to show that that person's a DEP member when it finally populates here into the participant section after you've selected those folks. What you will notice that's different as well is there's a height and weight column now. As we go through this, one of the biggest pains, I know, speaking directly as a flight chief at this point, right? We're doing our height and weight checks, right? Every 30 days, getting those height and weight updates in there. It used to be a lot of times where if you didn't do it in the exact right spot in AFRISS, it wouldn't always transfer, it wouldn't update, right? It was a big aggravating aspect to the DEP management piece. And so we actually added this column in here because that is going to be a functionality that actually helps us streamline that later on. And I'll get to that here in a little bit. But this is how we add all of the applicants that we need to our event. And to make it, like I said, quick and easy. Then you're going to create your recruit CC log. A lot of people have used this in the past. Some people didn't use it at all. They just, they kind of made it up on the fly. A lot of people had, personal offline versions that they created of the DEP CC log and all of that. But this is going to generate it for you with all the people that are applicants. It'll show you if they have a job or not, right, based off of that EAD date. It'll tell you when they have their next scheduled follow-up. You see here, it's blank here because these applicants are all out of test AFRISS, so they're all made up. But you see their DEP dates, you see their actual heights and weights, what they were when they DEP'd in, all of that stuff, all at a quick, easy glance. So you have an idea of, okay, is this person gaining a lot of weight? Are they not gaining a lot of weight? What are the different, every applicant is a little bit different, right? But formally, it used to be that you created this, you printed it out, and then you would fill it out online. And if you had it formatted just so right, you could re-upload it and it would work. Right. Now that formatting and that functionality was one, a lot of people didn't know exactly what format. There wasn't a lot of training on what format specifically it had to be in for it to upload correctly. And so some people got really frustrated with it and some people didn't. So we actually adjusted how this functionality actually works. So the kind of intent here is you actually print this out. You fill it out manually, basically just like by hand, basically writing in your weights for your applicants, writing in your comments, and having them sign it so that they've basically signed into the DEP event or the recruit event, excuse me. And then from there, that's how you're actually going to fill this out. And I'll show you here in a second. So at this point, you've added everybody to your event. You've added both the recruits and the DEP members. You've printed out your recruit CC log. The event is properly created and you're basically ready to go to actually hold that event. Now that's going to look a lot of different ways. So what were some of the more memorable recruit commanders calls that you've had in the past? What are some things that you've done?
So what I tried doing, what I did was, and still do is called it making memories. So the reason why I say making memories is because every single event, like you said, most of them are only going to get one, if that. So what I try to do is I try to find local businesses that we can go to. One is just going to capture our zone canvassing as well, and we can go there and have the event. So the most memorable one I had was going to, I'll say probably the pizza. There's a pizza place. I forgot the exact name of it. I know I feel bad right now, but I forgot the exact name. And Papo's, I think it was Papo's Pizza. And what we did was I coordinated with them. You put me on the spot, by the way.
I got you.
So I coordinated with them before. So like you already know what you're doing. So if you plan it right, you have like 2-3 weeks to plan each one. At least, 2-3 weeks. So if somebody falls through, you still have time to find somebody else. So I went to Papo's Pizza, asked them if we can just come there, and how much would it cost to feed all my people. I told them what we do. I said, hey, I'm with the Air Force. I have some people who are in a delayed entry program, but now I'll say something else. And what I try to do is called making memories. So when I make it sound like this, it sounds like it's something bigger than just the Air Force, than just like a local thing. It sounds like it's big. So like, okay, I want to be a part of that, because you don't want to be the first company that says no, that they don't want to help with making memories for the Air Force. So I kind of put that leverage on them, and they're like, yeah, of course, we can help you with that. And then they'll tell me a price. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I'll keep that price in mind. And then whenever it's the event that happens, we use that to kind of advertise for them. So Sasha Regano, he was my video guy out here, and we would capture the whole event and kind of use it as like an ad. So he got to go behind the scenes and actually watch how the pizza was made. And then after that was done, we had the pizza. So I was like, how much is it? He said, oh, don't worry about it. So we were able to kind of get it going that way. And then again, so what I do is I share it to them. We make the video, we share it to their page shared it, and they love it. And we also were able to do it with Big Shots as well. So Big Shots helped sponsor our event, and they actually just said that we'll do it for free. So I would say if you're trying to do that strategy, to go around and see who is willing to do it free first, start small, and then grow bigger. Once you start small, you have like social media posts that you can show these bigger organizations, and then you can show them like the algorithm, like how many people you attracted to see that event. And having Air Force and the community combined is big, so they love that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great way to not only get your DEP involved and share basically community, small businesses, or even large businesses in some instance, with your DEPers, but at the same time, them being friendly towards these people who are getting ready to take another big step in their lives. And either giving them specific access, or like you said, just simply making memories, right? That looks good on them, especially when you start sharing it on social media, because people always want to be community driven. And that's the way that you build relationships, right? Because now you have a relationship with this pizza place, right? You guys help them a little bit from an exposure standpoint, right? They helped you out because it helps you make memories with your DEP. And then maybe that leads to something later on, right? One of the kind of the ones that I've seen a lot of people do is they get it gets to be Super Bowl time, right? Put Air Force flyers into pizza boxes, right? Maybe that's what that guy does next, and he allows you to do that around Super Bowl when a lot of people will order pizzas, right? So now you're kind of expanding on ideas and having an influencer in your community that is friendly, you gain extra access, and you go from there. And that's a well thought out, that's a well planned out recruit commander's call, right? Because it's intentional. And that's really what we have with the slide here is, again, every recruiter's commander's call is going to be different, but there's always some things that you should be considering, right? First and foremost, you're their first mentor. Act like it, right? Be intentional with what you're trying to do and trying to develop. The things that we value in the Air Force, our core values, right? We always talk about being in our communities. We talk about the volunteering aspect that a lot of us do throughout our communities and the things that we're passionate about, whether that be an animal shelter, or maybe it's a homeless shelter, or maybe you're getting involved with big brother, big sister type stuff, or whatever the case might be, right? Those are the types of things that we try to teach the new airmen that are coming in, and then also letting them know, like, being intentional with what is going to make them great airmen, right? So whether that be focusing on their craft, right? Trying to instill a work ethic into them. Hey, when you get to your first base, you need to be in those CDCs. You need to hone your craft. It's not just good enough that you do all the little side stuff. You need to be an expert in your field. That's what we're training you to do, so you can make the mission happen. But being that first mentor, and acting like it in both your performance, what you're teaching them, right, and the people that you bring in that might potentially speak at a recruit commander's call. But giving them those opportunities, not wasting their time goes into that, right? Being intentional. One thing we always kind of talk about is relationships, and other people have said this in a million different ways, but relationships are a lot like a bank account, right? You can deposit and you can withdraw. And what happens a lot of times in the recruiting process is we invest, right? We deposit, so to speak, and we build all this rapport at the initial appointment, potentially through the actual processing aspect of it. But the minute they get into our DEP, or into the recruit stage, now at that point, it's, hey, I need this. Hey, we have a DEP call. Hey, show up to here, right? And at that point, we're just withdrawing. We're actually not investing into these applicants anymore. And that can wear on a relationship. And that's something that builds down the line to, hey, maybe I don't want to do this anymore, because the only time we ever talk is when you need my social or you need my whatever, right? Instead of just being like, hey, like we talked about before, how'd the wrestling meet go? How's mom and dad doing, right? How are you doing? Is your cousin still interested? Hey, what's going on, right? And so not wasting their time, but also investing in these people, and letting them know that you care. Again, what you think is important is what they're going to think is important. As a flight chief, we kind of say this a lot of times is, what the flight chief deems is important, generally the recruiters will think it's important, right? Yeah. Well, that applies to every step in the chain of command. And that applies to your applicants as well. If perpetuation and incentivizing going out and getting additional people to join the Air Force, if you constantly make that important, they're going to think that that is important as well, right? Yep. And then preparing them to be the go-to airman you want to be. That's a big one, because again, we're in the business of putting in people who want to be on this team, who want to excel on this team. And we don't want to ever give somebody a product, right? If we have pride in what we do, we don't want, and these applicants in a certain way are the product that we put into the Air Force. Granted, we can't control what they do after we leave here, but how we instill, how we present ourselves and set an example is a lot of what they're going to take forward. And we want them to be that go-to airman that we wish we had, right? We want to be that person that we can rely on. If I'm, if I'm working at the gate and security forces and we got somebody that's a gate runner, or somebody, a vehicle's flying up and I can need that wingman to be able to count on in that situation, I want it to be one of the airmen that I know you would, or my recruiters would have put into the Air Force, because of that they've been developed that way. The one-on-ones, like I said, building time to invest in that applicant. We have a lot of situations where in DEP calls, you'll see where they'll basically go out, they have the DEP call, it's 45 minutes. All right, cool, everybody, stay safe, go home, here's a safety brief or whatever. Or they'll ask questions like, hey, how's everybody feeling? Is anybody concerned or whatever? People are not going to ask those questions, right? Or say those things out loud in a big group, right? How many times have you had an applicant that they were kind of sheepish, like, let me check on them real quick, and then all of a sudden you had a good conversation about what was their feeling, right? You have to have those one-on-one times, whether that's at a separate time, or building time into that DEP call. For me, when I was a recruiter on the bag, it was always, we would hold our DEP calls, and then afterwards they would get time to basically talk amongst themselves. I would give them something to do while they were basically waiting. And I basically would go into my flight chief's office, and we would basically have a one-on-one session. So that way there was that little bit of time built in. So that way, because they won't bring those things up otherwise.
Yep. And actually, speaking of that, that's why I was doing or that's why I do the making the memories. It's just because also I was noticing there was downtime on that. When you're taking them out to the flight chief office, or when you're taking them somewhere by themselves, you still have them other guys just there, and they're like, all right, I don't really know you. And yeah, we can talk, we can introduce ourselves, but you can't force them to talk.
Right.
But when they're doing something together and they're doing like games, like on a golfing, they have to communicate with golfing. Like, hey, you're up next. Hey, you're up next. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, you're next. Like you're killing it out there. Like you're next. Let's go. Let's see what you got. And then now you're taking them to like the bench where everyone's eating, and then that's your one-on-one time. So I think it's very important to get people to let them do something that keeps them busy while you can, like you said, you can pull someone around. So
Yeah, it's incredibly important. PT is a great way to do that type of stuff as well, right? A lot of people will uh, use a PT session for their recruit commanders calls to kind of get everybody active, and whether that be, sometimes it's as simple as doing just a relay, like, hey, we're gonna do a 100-meter relay.
yeah.
And, we don't have a baton, but we use this frisbee, whatever, but to get some sort of teamwork going. And it can be tough, right? At the end of the day, to do after all of that you've done, right? Maybe you showed up early because you had an ASVAB proctor, you had a bunch of appointments back to back, right? Then you're doing your admin, maybe you had something going on in the afternoon, and then all of a sudden now it's later in the day and you have the recruit commander's call. Our job can be very both physically sometimes, but very mentally draining, and it's hard to show up. And the reality is these applicants don't care how hard your day was. And us as NCOs, and even a few airmen out there in recruiting, right? We have to be professional enough to understand, hey, I got to check how hard my day was at the door, because I got to show up for these applicants right now. I have to be present. I have to be available. I have to be, have empathy towards whatever's going on in their day right now, because that's part of our job. Regardless of how hard the day was, we can't let those emotions, spill over into the applicants that we're dealing with. It's a really quick way to spoil a relationship, miss big warning signs, red flags, and just one to shed yourself in a really poor light. You don't want to present yourself as the exhausted airman
Yep.
at the end of the day. So I think that. Go ahead.
I know. So I remember my rapper came by after about 2 months of him being in, and he got to see my full day. And my full day is different than a lot of people. Not saying I do the most, but I'm just saying I do a lot. And he was like, wow, like I never knew you did all this. Like every time I called you or texted you, you were texting me back in like an hour, because I rarely sleep. So it's like even at night, and I don't want to promote this too much, with everyone, because everyone can't do this, right? Obviously find your time, but sometimes those 8 o'clock phone calls are vital. So I try to tell people that. Not saying that you need to answer every time, but just try to make yourself available. Like you said, like if you're out in the field, let's be real. If you're out in if you weren't a recruiter, what happens during those all calls? What happens when somebody is drunk driving, and now guess where you are at 6 o'clock in the morning? You're blues. We don't do that. So, but that time that we do that in that field, we can obviously answer a phone call for 5 minutes in this field at home with your phone. So, I showed them that part, and like you said, is very key to keep yourself engaged and put them first. Or not put them first, but show, like you said, show up, like have that energy, because that same energy that you're providing, they're going to be able to use that energy to show somebody else. So,
right. Yeah, 100%. It's as cliche and cringy as it gets, but that attitude is contagious. It really is, and it matters a lot to these applicants. And the last part is just being comfortable with standards in the chain of command. At the end of the day, that's something they're going to have to deal with. That's part of our job as airmen, as NCOs. And just being in the Air Force in general and our culture. So making them comfortable with those standards. And I don't mean, that you're going to be, putting them at attention and yelling at them and all kinds of crazy stuff. But, the moment that they become a person who says they're committed to the Air Force, they have to get qualified and stay qualified. And there's a certain level of accountability that we have to make sure that these applicants remember, like, hey, look, I realize things are getting a little bit tough, but you're creeping up in there and weight, and I need you. If you need me to help you with that, you want me to work out with you, I will work out with you. But we need to make sure that you're holding yourself accountable, because I can't force you to eat whatever. You have to do that, right? So like still holding our applicants accountable and setting standards, right? And a lot of times it sounds like a negative thing, but the reality is people thrive when there's high standards. That's how it's designed. And so if we can set those high standards even for our applicants, and then get them used to the chain of command, right? A lot of people, and I've seen a lot of creative ways that recruiters have done this, about having having their own little DEP commander that they have, whether it's the oldest person. You got one too?
Yeah, I got one of what we have. He's been with us because he's a soft book. So,
Okay,
and
perfect.
he's an ROTC. So he's our DEP commander, and he makes everyone go in formation. We actually do office DEP calls. So they do the formation, they'll find something in the memory book that we use, obviously the Aim High app now as well. So they'll
Yep.
read off the Aim High app, and they'll say the Air Force song or the Airman's Creed. And for us, to kind of make it a little bit seem okay, to kind of like slowly adjust them to it. That's what we start with. So we do the roll call, and after the roll call, I'll turn to the DEP commander and be like, hey, they're all yours. And he has them for like the next 10 to 15 minutes. So he's the one that's teaching them. So again, it's not us teaching them, it's like when they're peers. So they're more willing to learn from it. And like so far, I haven't seen anybody kind of like do that yet. But I know that when I was younger and I used to see people doing it, you used to see people in the back like doing that stuff. And then I feel like having the peers teach them is very key.
100%. Peer-to-peer accountability goes a long way, right? So, and that's exactly it. If you have a DEP commander, I know mine, he was also ROTC. He was also a soft book, right? Because you were with them for a long time. I mean, he would do some of the check-ins. They would report to him. He would report to me. We would have our, like you said, have them form up. I mean, that's a fantastic way to introduce that chain of command. Well, the other thing too, and something I think that gets overlooked sometimes, we try to be really personable in the beginning stages of the process, right? And I've seen it a lot of times, and I don't see it really as a negative thing. But everybody has different opinions on it. But you see a lot of times recruiters be like, hey man, call me Brandon, and you kind of get that warm stuff. Some people do that, some people don't. But when they get to that recruit stage, it's like, hey, it's starting to read now. Because we're going to establish that chain of command, right? So even if you were kind of friendly initially, establishing that and being like, hey, look, here's the deal. Every time you message me or you call me or whatever, it's going to be Sergeant Reed. When you come into the office, you need your reporting statement, right? Start getting them used to what it's going to be like when you get to basic training. And that comes with that standards piece, and establishing that chain of command is cutting that off to a certain extent in a positive and a tactful way, if you've built a different kind of rapport. But I don't think that ever is a negative thing to say, hey, it's military time now. This is how it's going to work. So, but yeah, just a couple of things for anybody who, the idea of the product is, if you've never done a recruit commander's call before, here's how you're going to be able to do it. Also, here's some tips and tricks if this is going to be your first one, to kind of think about what you could be able to possibly do. Filling out that recruiter's commander or the recruit commander's call log. So the intent now, because we kind of changed that functionality, is you have a printed copy of it, you fill that out, and you're handwriting in the weight. So if you're on the go, right? So let's say, for example, you're out at, Papo's Pizza, or you're out at a park doing PT or whatever the case is, you have that commander's log. You're doing the heights and weights, you're filling that in, and you have that physical copy with you. You're obtaining those signatures of the folks who showed up to the commander's call. And then you're writing in some quick notes, if there's anything important that came out of it, whether through the one-on-one, maybe just in general, like, hey, it looked like Johnny tweaked his ankle a little bit when we were on the run, just kind of jotting notes and being aware of what's going on. So you have all of that. Now that is the printed copy. When you come back, the idea now is to document the event. I will say that in the testing that we've done and some of the recruiters using it, it on average took anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes for a smaller DEP, and for a larger DEP, about a half hour to complete every single person's height, weight, personalized comment, and have it all loaded into AFRISS without any type of issues. So it is going to be extremely efficient in the way that this is going to work. So When you are done with the event, you go back in, you open it up. The achieved block here that you see, right? Some people have templates, some people are going to throw it in different ways, right? This is just an example. But this achieved comment is going to be the same for every single applicant that you had added to that event. All right. So this is going to be your generalized. This should not be the personalized comment. This shouldn't be like the one-on-one comments. This is going to be, what was the DEP call about? Who, you know, basically, did you have anything special going on with it? What is the DEP call as a whole, right? So you'll enter those achieved comments. You'll go through, you'll fill that out. And then, and this is, would be the next step. And this is where we've encountered some issues. Some people have had issues uploading the commander's call logs. We're trying to figure out, we're troubleshooting a little bit. Is it a file size issue? Is it a file type issue? So we're trying to get that worked out. So more to follow on that. But as of right now, if you encounter any type of problems uploading the recruit commander's log, that we're aware of that issue as of right now. But the intent would be is you take that printed copy, scan it in, and upload it basically as a PDF. So that way, you know, you can go back and see, okay, how many people attended this DEP call or who attended, but because they signed in, right? This is where it gets, I think, in my opinion, the most efficient part of this whole thing. You have the applicant. So this first applicant here, you click on that applicant, highlighting them yellow. You'll go in, the height and weight columns are editable. So you can actually go in and change the heights and weights to update it to current.
And how do you do that? Or so you click on what now?
Yep. So you would just click on, so you have that top DEP member highlighted there in yellow. Let's say, obviously most of the time you're not going to get their height, right? Yeah. It's not going to change too many times, right? Especially if they've already gone to MEPS, it's going to be their MEPS height. But the weight, let's say Johnny weighs in, he's 130 pounds instead of 137 pounds, right? You're able to, in this block right here, you'll click on 137, you can type in 130 pounds. So that way you add that, you update that height and weight right there. Then, as it's still highlighted, that whole, because once you click on the line, it'll highlight the whole thing. You'll go into the personalized comment and you'll put in whatever your personalized comment is for that specific applicant. You'll put in whatever comments you want. Again, this is just a version of that. After you're done putting in the height and weight and putting in the personalized applicant remark, you'll hit submit applicant remarks. What that is going to do is going to take the overall DEP achieve block that we already put in and that personalized comment, as well as their height and weight, and it's going to throw it all in only that applicant's file. Okay, so now you basically, before you're all said and done, what you'll do is click on it, type in your personalized applicant remark, update the height, go to the next one, do that, and kind of go through every one of those. And every single time you're going to hit submit applicant remark after each time you do that. Okay.
I'm going to make this I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm going to have to make this the thumbnail, because this right here, this right here is going to be, this is the most important thing. This is what we've been asking for a long time. So, and I feel like I'm talking right now to kind of make sure that we highlight this part, because this right here is definitely going to be something that we'll be talking about for probably next month or two, if not 3, trying to get everybody on board for this, because this is going to save a lot of time, and it's probably going to be one of the most overlooked things that can be changed right now that can save hours.
It literally will save hours. I kid you not. Because the way this is going to look, and I'll show you on the next screen here, is just like this. So every person that you clicked hits applicant, submit applicant remarks on. There you see what the achieved comments are, right? That we put in there earlier, right? From the achieved block. There's that little dashed line that'll say personalized applicant remarks, and whatever you typed in that personalized applicant remarks section. So it literally updates that and it puts that into each applicant. So no longer do you have to complete the event, the AFRISS event, get out, go to every single applicant, right click, do follow-up, type in your comments, hope the height and weight are updated, or go in, do height weight updates. The amount of clicks that it took to get us previously to that place was enormous. Now it's literally all in one location. And like I said, on average, this is 10 to 15 minutes of admin for a smaller batch of recruits. And I would say a half hour tops for even a large DEP of up to 30 people, because you've already written the comment, so to speak, when you had that printed out paper when you were at the DEP commander's call, or excuse me, recruit commander's call. It's going to take some time getting used to that. And so you're just transcribing it,
Yep, and like I said, I mean, I read the PowerPoint when you sent it to me, and again, for me, this is why I really wanted to kind of spearhead this the rare team, was because I'm a more of a visual and like the video type of learner. So like you telling me this stuff is gonna make me pretty much remember this for forever now. When I read PowerPoints, it just wasn't clicking all the time. I try to go PowerPoints, I'm looking at it and I'm going to this PowerPoint, to this one. I'm like, okay, but what did you click? Sometimes it gets lost. So that's why, I'm trying to do this, and then hopefully we can do a video on this. So that way you can kind of like show like maybe a 45-second, I know it's probably looking at around 2-3 minute video of us trying to actually do one all together. And that's something else that we'll talk about later on. But this right here is huge, and I do appreciate you taking the time to tell me about this part right here. This is gonna be key to everybody. You're talking about hours, and we're talking about 1,600 recruiters saving at least an hour, at least 1 hour per MEPS call, and that's 1,600 hours saved in the first month. That's huge.
And just like that, like I said, it's an absolute game changer. Obviously, if you look through any of the new SOPG updates, the responsibility is to have a face-to-face follow-up with an applicant every 34 days. Right. And so what we did here to even make that part nice, because in your head, if you think about it, you're like, oh, well, I'd still technically have to set a follow-up if I didn't have a follow-up scheduled for that applicant, right? False. We thought about that. So the aspect of it is the minute you hit that button, it's going to update the height and weight. It's going to update the last height weight update portion, right? So on the left-hand side here, and it'll also update the last DEP CC, or excuse me, recruit CC, the last in-person follow-up, all to the date of that recruit CC call. And then also, if you do not have a follow-up set, and we've played around with this a little bit, if you do not have a follow-up set, it will automatically set your next follow-up for 34 days from now. So you don't even have to go in and do that. If you already had a follow-up set, let's say, for example, you knew that person was going to come in person for something, later that week or something like that, it's not going to override that follow-up because you've already set that for a date in the future. But if a lot of times, especially as a flight chief, we'll go through and see, okay, are people following up with their applicants, whatever. And a lot of times it's just blank, right? And that's just because sometimes AFRISS does that. You complete something, you don't actually schedule another follow-up. This will automatically schedule that follow-up if you don't already have one, to make sure that you're going to see them within that 34-day time frame. And that's realistically the goal of it, is to make sure that we are not missing those. We're increasing those touch points. We're seeing our applicants on a regular basis, and it allows us to do that. So yeah, this is, you kind of summarized it already, right? Documenting a DEP CC in multiple locations, eliminated, right? You just start scratching all of it off the board. Extra admin at the end of the day, eliminated. And obviously, again, individual follow-ups for high numbers of applicants, get it out of here, because your guys' time is too valuable. We as a team need to make sure that we're providing you guys with the tools necessary to do the stuff we know we have to do in the most efficient way possible, right? Just like with the AIM High app, being able to capture leads and minimize the admin of inputting leads really makes that a more efficient process. Same thing with this. Anything that we can do, and honestly, all of these ideas are coming from you guys. The field is undefeated. The field is undefeated when it comes to thinking of great ways and efficient ways to do this. So you guys have to keep providing feedback to your leadership teams, letting us know, like, hey, this process It can be improved. Here's how, right? I always challenge people. Don't just say, hey, this sucks. Come with a solution, right? Do the work, come up with a solution. And you can see if you look at the change logs that they have in AFRISS, right? The different little updates, look at all the different names of people submitting AFRISS enhancement requests. There's so many great ideas out there in the field. If you guys keep doing that, we can keep building stuff like this and making things as efficient as possible, so we can get back to doing what we need to do, and then straight up going home and seeing our families as well, right? Because that's what it's about. How can we do this job in an efficient 8 hours, 9 hours sometimes? And we know there's going to be longer days and shorter days. We get that. But how do we get it done in the time that we need to get it done in, and then be with our families, be with our friends, and do the things that we love and enjoy?
Yes, sir. So actually on that note, when we went down there for the SOPG rewrite, that's when we were kind of talking about this. Do you remember what day that was or what month that was? It was, I believe it was
January.
January, and we're looking at April right now. So you're looking at what, February, March, April, 2.5 months. We had a few ideas, we had some visions. We didn't really know how to execute it. That's why we came to you. And 2.5 months later, it was executed, not just because we only complained about it, but we also showed resources on how we can make it better. And again, that's what we're trying to say and trying to show people. We can only provide and fix stuff with feedback. And I know not to kind of talk about something else, but the aim high is the same way. All these processes can be changed and are changing constantly with, like you said, with the feedback that we're providing. I feel like if you're going to complain about something, you have to have a solution for it. And this is something I was complaining about, was the information being spread. Right. That's why I'm trying to do this as well, to try and spread out more information. And I just challenge other people to pretty much come up with better processes. If you don't like this process, or if you don't like something, do something better, or let that person know what can be done better. So
100%. And the thing that people need to know is you have an absolutely fantastic RSI team right now. Sergeant Mustin, Sergeant Flores, those guys are definitely experts in what they do. They're incredibly efficient in getting the information up and getting it to the developers to get the stuff taken care of. And then not just that, but there's been a bunch of teams, right? Everybody kind of talks about Tiger teams, this and that. And there's so many fantastic teams that have been out there that have brought a lot of this know-how to being able to come up with these solutions. And those folks have all done an absolutely terrific job. And the thing is the appetite is here. Let's make this more efficient. It's not as difficult as it may appear to be, because when you're standing in the office, you're like, man, how do I even fix this problem? Sometimes it can seem really overwhelming. Like there's so much that you feel like red tape that has to be cut. And the reality is it's probably 3 or 4 people that probably control the whole thing, right? And so being able to know who those folks are and go direct to the problem, and putting those solutions out there, that's the way to do it. What you're doing with the Rare team, what other folks have done in terms of just, hey, I know there's a problem. I'm not going to sit around and wait till somebody up at the mythical headquarters fix it, right? We always kind of look at that as like this, no named entity, but the reality is it's just a bunch of people, right? Exactly. If you already have an idea for a fix, make your own team, put the work in, put a presentation together, route it up to your chains of command. All the squadrons are doing everything they can to push the good information up from the recruiters. One of the unique things about this field, I will say, and I'll totally get off my soapbox, is that it is a very small career field. Right. And a lot of us come from very large career fields. We have a lot of maintainers, we have a lot of cops, right? We have a lot of large career field folks that come into recruiting. The impact that you can have, even as a tier 1 recruiter, because this career field is so small and because we are all going towards kind of a singular mission, is, I would say, I think it's hard to find another career field where you can have that level of impact, regardless of whether you're a senior airman, a staff sergeant, tech sergeant, master sergeant, regardless of what rank you think you are, or excuse me, what you are, or what position you think you have. Regardless of what rank you are, or what position you think you have to fill, if you have an idea and you feel like you have a solution, even if it may not be completely the right one, it may have elements of being the right one. And you have people that want to empower you to be able to bring those solutions for the benefit of the rest of the field. You know, and I think what you guys are doing is a terrific aspect of that. And in general, like I said, there's a lot of really, really great ideas out there in the field, and recruiters who are doing a fantastic job of seeing the pain points because they're coming with new experiences and new ways of looking at how we do business, and finding really creative ways to get better at this. And that's really all everybody wants to do, is get better at this, so that way we can be as effective as possible. And kind of, you know, there's probably, you know, always kind of talk about, this is as close to a deployment, so to speak, as we're ever going to get in recruiting, right? It's a really crucial time right now. And so we need those ideas. We need people to be smart and to make it happen. So again, if you have questions, if you have concerns, yep, there you go. There's Master Sergeant Mustin and Sergeant Flores, your fantastic RSI team up there at headquarters, who you know, facilitate all of these changes. They're the ones who make it happen. They take your ideas, they put them through every scenario that we can possibly think of to make sure we're getting it right. You know, what are the secondary and tertiary effects? And then they get it to the developers, and they have those fantastic relationships, and they make it happen really quickly. So they do a fantastic job. They're busy, but they kill it every day.
All right. And once again, I just wanted to thank you for your time, especially with, I think we just spent, actually it's about an hour presentation. But guess what? That hour can be saved with new updates to
There you go.
that command call. So, you know, I didn't waste any time. And so I do appreciate you coming out here and stopping by. So thank you so much.
No, I appreciate you setting this up. Like I said, anything that we can do to help out. And if anybody has any questions, you know, just Brandon.Reid, REID. I'm the only one in terms of the global, no numbers or anything like that. Send me an email if you have questions. I'm more than happy to help out. But thanks for facilitating this, man.
Yes, sir.